Thank you so much for having me here today. My background is in transportation. I've worked in transit. I've worked with cars. I've worked with taxis. I love transportation. But historically, I think it's had less of a place within the realm of health, within the realm of wellness, within the realm of placemaking, unfortunately. Today, I think that is changing. We're moving towards the greater good, the North Star. And actually, throughout today's presentations, almost everyone has mentioned some aspect of transportation within their presentations. So transportation is very important to place, not only creating place, but connecting people to places. And I think that's very interesting to think about because, you know, step outside of your, at least here in New York City, your apartment building, building face to building face, that's probably the Department of Transportation, Public Works. The public right-of-way takes up a lot of space within our cities. Our streets, our sidewalks, infrastructure such as bus stops and train stations, plazas. They're traditionally the backdrop of people traveling through. And that's pretty interesting because historically, transportation planning has been used to define the value of neighborhoods, right? So who has the right to access grocery stores, jobs, schools, and who has the right to exist freely in public space? Actually the presentation right before this one, make sure I don't get it wrong. The Iron Triangle, as shown in the map, was bordered by railroads and then the transit system. So transportation has been used to define neighborhoods. And unfortunately, this has been a tool that's primarily used against communities of color in the form of building highways right through neighborhoods, stop and frisk, loitering laws, and the absence of sidewalks, as mentioned by Representative Wale earlier this morning. The field of transportation has a long way to go to atone for and correct for physically destroying communities, places we've neglected, and the people we've created quality of life barriers for. So what's happening now within the realm of transportation is a system change to address this structural inequality that we've created. Think of it as a movement around movement. So what does it look like to disrupt the norms we've created, that transportation is the practice of passing through rather than its true identity as the link for social and economic wellness? How do we reverse the legacy of designing and regulating the public right-of-way as transitory rather than destinations in themselves? In beginning to recognize the public right-of-way as place itself, the transportation field is beginning to look at how people use and associate with the space and infrastructure that we're designing, going beyond the physical limits of the street itself to address the social impacts of design and policy. And this all begins with goal setting and prioritization. I think Alexa mentioned this earlier during the Detroit presentation. But cities are moving away from the purely technical ambitions of moving the maximum amount of cars per hour down a street towards more people-oriented goals. An example of this would be the adoption of complete streets philosophy. Has anyone heard of complete streets? Okay, a lot of it. Okay. So I won't go into detail, but basically it's a philosophy approach, a design approach that ensures that streets are planned to enable safe, convenient, and comfortable travel and access for all users regardless of ability and age. So again, a focus on the people using the infrastructure rather than the infrastructure or vehicles themselves. This also looks like the adoption of pedestrian cyclist focused Vision Zero. I'm sure most of you have heard. Okay, great. So in attacking the epidemic of fatalities as a result of car crashes, cities are recognizing streets as places where children play, where families stop and talk. I really enjoy the corner in front of my apartment. That's where me and all my friends meet and talk about what happened during the day. But streets are places for public activity. This also looks like culturally responsive design. What does it mean for notions of who infrastructure is built for and who is welcome to share that space unconstrained if what we design moves from standard or off-the-shelf design options to being directly responsive to the varying norms, traditions, and uses that community has already organically developed? An example of this would be dominoes. Does anyone here play dominoes outside? Oh, okay, awesome. All right, so you grow up in any urban center, you know, there are uncles, my dad, outside on the sidewalk playing dominoes. What if in redesigning our streets, we reclaim space from vehicles, add to sidewalks where we can formalize that space where people are already doing the activities that they want to do? This, thank you so much. Thanks. This also could look like the West Coast example, Oakland, which I love. Um, there's a street redesign project going on that centers around bike lanes. So, you know, this could be a very hot topic issue for people in terms of displacement and ideas around gentrification. But what if we design bike lines for the youth culture in Oakland called the Scraper Bike Team, the Scraper community, which likes to ride down the center of the street? They want to be seen. What if we design our bike lanes to fit their needs rather than what we expect or who we use as our traditional design user, which is traditionally, as mentioned earlier again, probably white, probably wealthy, probably heterosexual, probably able-bodied. And finally, what does this look like for prioritization and changing the denominators? So in urban planning across all specialties, but especially in the fields where we work a lot with engineers, they want to see numbers. They want to see metrics. They want to know what the outcomes will be. They want to know how to measure it. And going back to the history of transportation and it being used to, you know, negatively impact communities, how can we use those same measures that they use for redlining, that they use to decide where they were going to bulldoze neighborhoods to create highways, such as share of non-white population or, you know, median income of a neighborhood, to reinvest that money, redirect those resources. So cities are beginning to use non-traditional metrics such as share of non-white population, share of communities that share of households that speak English as a second language to direct those resources. Cities are trying. Transportation, I think, is a field that we're behind. We're behind health. We're behind housing, and recognizing that what we build is for people. But everyone here can help. As mentioned in the Detroit presentation again, you know, if there is an option for I'd say the T word, but taxes. There's a gas tax option that'll go to supporting infrastructure. You have to rally. You have to get your neighbors, you have to get your friends to support it. Cities need political cover. In prioritizing communities of color and prioritizing low-income communities, there's going to be a lot of pushback from the people who have the traditional sense of agency. Governments are going to need you to get your friends, to call your council members, to show up to meetings, to let them know that you want these communities prioritized. I'm going to hand the mic over now. Hopefully I didn't pass time.